For 21 years, the Center for Art in Wood, through its Windgate ITE program, has been bringing talented artists who work in wood, plus a photojournalist, for a 2-month residency program in Philadelphia. This year, all the resident fellows happen to be women, and for the first time, one was a student artist. And it seems like these 7 women got along famously.
Hi, Betty Scarpino. I'm the photojournalist and artist for this residency. Everyone in this group brought their mature personalities with them. Perhaps because many of us are teachers, we saw the need to support each other and create an atmosphere of a positive working situation, so we got along really well and had a lot of good laughs and shared experiences, shared techniques.
Sounds wonderful.
It really was, and you'll see the work in the gallery, you'll see the finished product, but what you won't see is that spirit of working together that we achieved in the 8 weeks that we were together, and the experiences that we shared, and the time that we spent together supporting each other. That's really what this ITE was about.
On a table facing the north window is a group of very playful constructions that were created collaboratively. Before examining the artists as individuals, let's see what they created as a group.
So these were really icebreakers for us. They were a way to get to know everybody and to get to understand other people's ways of making and ways of thinking.
The collaboration was the thing we did when we first got here. Katie had suggested that we start with a chunk of basswood. So there are 7 pieces of basswood, and then I suggested that we come up with a whole series of words that we could use as a guide. Each of us put 10 words into a box and folded them up and hid them. You would pick a word, you would do something that responded to the word, to the piece. It could be anything, it could be something very fast. So you would do something to it, then you'd put it back on the table, and then the next person would pick it up and pick a word and then do something to it again. So there were 7 pieces, 7 words, and we passed them all around.
There is one piece that is vaguely political. It has quotes of the Constitution.
Michaela got that one very first thing.
The game was to pick a word out of a jar. The word that I got was separation. For whatever reason, probably because the DNC was about to happen in a month, the very first thing that came to my mind was separation of church and state. And then I thought, well, this is supposed to be like a fun game. It's not supposed to be a serious exercise, like we're just warming up, so I'll just do the first thing that came to my head. I sliced it in half and then wrote Thomas Jefferson's famous quote about the separation of church and state.
The pieces are a wide variety of intentions. Some of them are very goofy and playful, and some of them are serious. Some of them held together really well because the words were very strong, and so we kept paying attention to those throughout the project. She put that phrase on it, and that's what drove the project from then on, and that's why I think that project is so strong. The minute she put that quote on there, everything that we got was seen through the lens of that quote.
My name is Amy Forsythe.
I came here thinking I was going to make some things that I did not make, and instead revisiting my background in architecture. That was actually a little bit of a surprise, but because I was really living in the city for the first time, I think that impacted my work a lot. I'm actually from Pennsylvania. I grew up in Trevose. I started off in music and then switched to architecture, went to Penn State for undergrad, then to Princeton as a grad student in architecture. And then I started teaching architecture, and I did that for a while. I made this project. It was a constructed pavilion, and I liked everything about it except how I made it. I thought maybe if I took a furniture class, it might make the construction better. And then I completely fell in love with furniture and started making furniture. So I was teaching architecture at Penn State for a while. When I moved to North Carolina, I taught at UNC Charlotte in the architecture department, and then I got a job teaching at Lehigh University, and there I teach furniture design and three-dimensional design since 2001. I've always been trying to struggle with how to incorporate the sketchbook that I keep going all the time and my furniture work. This time I did manage to make that happen. I wound up doing work that was really about the perception of moving through the city. Two of the pieces that I made were about journeys, one from the country to the city, which is pretty much what I have been doing, living in the country and now living in the city for a couple months. And then the other one had to do with our moving through the Forsythe building, which is where we were staying, which is a very odd path. You go under an archway, you go into a courtyard, you go into the building, up an elevator, then you go outside again on the 4th floor and up into your living quarters where there's this huge skylight and this really amazing big window. And through it you can see the Kimmel Center and you can see the Drake building. I stare at the Drake building and think, what is in that cupola up there? And so just the idea of being inside and looking through a frame and looking at the city, that was something that crept its way into my work.
Hi, I'm Nujalin Wangpongsawat. I'm wood artist from Bangkok, Thailand. I did undergrad in industrial design before I came to woodworking school in US. I went to Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. That is where I learned how to do woodworking and making furniture. At first, it started with my interest in furniture mainly, but once I started to get hand-on with the wood itself, and then I learned different techniques. I learned about myself through the woodworking process. That's when I fall in love with the material. And now I mainly work with wood. It doesn't have to be furniture or anything, but as long as it's wood, it can be sculpture, it can be artwork. And I have my studio back in Bangkok. I set it up in 2015, and then I got into this residency, so I'm coming back to US after having been back in 3 years. I used to live in upstate New York for 4 years when I'm going to grad school. And when I'm done, I'm moving back home.
Your work is really beautiful. It's very abstract. How do you come up with the ideas?
The ideas are very simple. My main interest is repetition and progression, which come from architecture, which come from natural creature, structure in bone and everything. Mostly this stuck in my head when I'm doing my daily routine, when I'm dry and then I see a abandoned building, when I'm taking a walk, or like when I'm watching some documentary about animal and then I saw their anatomy. Normally I try to limit my technique when I'm working, so if I use bandsaw, I will try to just mainly use bandsaw, and if I try to use table saw, I will just try to use table saw, limit the technique but try to expand the possibility from the limitation. How can I push myself through my limit and still explore more with the repetition and progression?
What was it like being with these other women here?
It's great. I think this is the first time I got to spend my time with other women who do woodworking, because the grad school I went to, they are mainly male woodworker, and even back home we have a lot of woodworker and furniture maker, but we don't have a lot of female woodworking or female wood artists. So this is very nice changing environment that I can get to learn from other people too. And they're all very talented, very supportive and very humble, which is I very appreciate all the time I spend with them in the studio. It's great.
Thank you very much. I guess it's a lot colder in Rochester than it is in Bangkok.
Oh, Rochester is whole another world for me. Yeah, I think I have had enough snow in my life already for a year there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Michaela Stone, and I'm from Rockport, Maine. I did my undergraduate at Skidmore College in Saratoga Springs, New York. I studied sculpture and painting, and then I took the 12-week furniture intensive at the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Rockport, Maine. I've been woodworking and making furniture for the last 5 years. I am the youngest member of the group in the ITE, and it's been just a remarkable, inspiring experience to be working with these women who have so much more experience than I do. I've learned a lot in the past couple months from them, which has been great. I work all over the place in some ways. I think of functionality as a spectrum and as a tool to use, but I don't think that functionality has to determine whether a piece of work is craft versus art or versus design. I float between those three fields without much regard for where my work falls between art, craft, and design. I just try to make what's interesting to me. I like to use functionality as a tool for interaction. For instance, a chair could fulfill that by engaging the viewer through a physical interaction and also a physical use. Sometimes I make work that relates to the body and can be worn, playing to the idea of physical interaction, hinting at functionality. But in those pieces, there isn't actually an express function, and in many ways, the pieces restrict or constrain the wearer. I find that an interesting exercise in playing with the definition of functionality. My mom found a springbok hide in her storage unit that she had received as a gift when she was in Africa before I was born. She asked me if I wanted it, if I could do anything with this springbok hide. I said, of course I can. And so that inspired my springbok chair. I used the silhouette of a springbok leaping in the air, which is a signature movement of this animal, as the silhouette for the profile of the chair, and then the springbok hide is draped over the seat. It's mounted to a nice piece of leather. I grew up in Rockport, Maine, which is on the coast, and spent a lot of time in the ocean, in the woods. Did a lot of exploring with my dogs as a kid and always had an interest in life sciences. I studied biology initially in college and switched over to art midway through. Learning about nature has really inspired my work, and it shows through in ways that are intentional, but mostly in ways that are unintentional and subconscious.
Hi, Mom. Oh, thank you.
Can you just tell me about the dynamics of this group of women? Was there a particular bad girl in the bunch?
Well, I think we took turns. Ashley, I would say, is probably the bad girl of us all. And because she's brilliant and hilarious, you know, when she got bad, we actually really enjoyed that.
Ashley, I asked who was the bad girl of the group, and it turns out it was you.
What? Nonsense.
Hi, I am Ashley Eriksmoen.
Currently the head of the furniture workshop at Australian National University. I'm from California, went to college for geology and worked as an engineering geologist. In the meantime was learning furniture making. I ended up going to College of the Redwoods for 2 years with Jim Krenoff and then getting a master's of furniture design at Rhode Island School of Design. My practice has always addressed people's feelings of connection to their surroundings. My earlier work had to do with making furniture and objects that seemed animated through some form of gesture. My work moved into more directly environmental issues around consumerism, sustainability. In my ikebana, using found objects to make a plant life that contrasts with an architectural form of the tansu underneath. I'm looking at ideas around order and chaos, moral implications around grooming the wilderness versus allowing for wildness. I started doing some very new work at the center, thinking about gun violence in America and the emotional toll that it takes on society, especially children being victims of gun violence. Bang Bang, which is also known as the gun dogs. It's ambiguous whether they are cute or scared or aggressive. With Saudade, the heart floating above either a skin or a puddle of a reflection of a heart, so a discarded heart and a floating heart. saudade being a feeling that's similar to nostalgia or melancholy, but specifically having to do with remembering a loved one who isn't coming back. The last piece, For Whom the Bell Tolls, is an automa where you pull the trigger and it allows the wings on the heart to flap. For Whom the Bell Tolls is originally by John Donne. Don't ask for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for you. The idea that every time someone dies a violent death, it takes a toll on everybody, and it shouldn't just be your concern if you knew the person or if it was a friend, that it actually hurts everybody.
Hi, my name is Katie Hadlow. I teach at Heron School of Art and Design in the furniture design program that's in Indianapolis. So I went to undergrad at the Corcoran College of Art and Design in DC, thinking I was going to study illustration. Fell in love with sculpture instead. And then I went to Virginia Commonwealth University for grad school in woodworking and furniture design. I make wooden contraptions. I would call myself a furniture maker second and a woodworker first. I'm really fascinated by wood as a material, by woodworking and the processes involved. I am enamored with found materials. I use a lot of scraps, so being in a wood shop is always ideal for me because I'm using everybody else's seconds and leftovers. I also am constantly dumpster diving and looking for old pieces. Wood is a material hard enough that you can build enormous buildings out of it, and soft enough that you can, over the course of a lifetime, wear yourself into its surface. All the marks that you find on pallet wood, on things that have been thrown away, for me, they're like a perfect starting point to talk about what it means to be living in the world, because all of those marks are part of the history of humans with the material, whatever it is. So there's something really lovely to me about starting with that patina. And then the things that I build, sometimes they're absurd, sometimes they're really funny. I love getting people to laugh, to clap their hands in delight when something does something. So I use a lot of mechanisms in my work that are kind of fun to play with. They're kinetic. I make push toys and pull toys where when you push or pull something, something else happens. The box opens and closes, but I've drawn on it to look like it's an alligator opening and closing its mouth, maybe. So I do a lot of that, but then I'm also trying to figure out relationships. The big piece that I worked on for the ITE is a continuation of a series that I called Symbiosis. And it's about relationships. It started off being about my trying to address what a symbiotic relationship looks like, especially through the lens of furniture. So these odd contraptions supporting each other. I was thinking of it as a jewelry box of sorts. It's a series of 19 boxes that all open and close, and they're tiny. They're just big enough to hold a ring or a set of earrings. They're opened and closed by a series of buttons at the back of the piece. And so in order to use this thing, you have to work in tandem with somebody else, and you have to be giving each other instructions. So the notion is that it's this piece about communication between couples.
You also do a lot of really wonderful drawings. Are your drawings preparatory for the sculptures?
Sometimes they are, often not. I jokingly say that I only make something when I do a drawing of it and I can't figure out what the back of it looks like from the drawing. It's kind of a joke, but it's kind of true too.
My name's Rebecca Kolajajak.
Easy for you to say.
I'm a student artist resident with the ITE Residency program. I just graduated from University of the Arts in Philadelphia in May and went directly into residency a couple weeks after graduating, which was a whirlwind, but was very much appreciated because it's kind of like I never left. But everything kind of slowed down but sped up at the same time, so that was really interesting. And it was also nice to be exposed to so many different working artists and educators after coming out of that educational environment. So I thought that was really beneficial, getting to make work that I was making for my thesis and then being exposed to all of these other people that have already had these very established, dedicated careers in the woodworking field, and to be exposed to that right out of undergrad.
Did you get some good tips and ideas from the other women in the program?
Oh, absolutely. A ton of new techniques. We had a little tool swap where it's like, oh, what's that thing? What's that used for? Learning how everybody uses different tools also, and seeing how everybody works and what kind of ethic they have. For me, being in University of the Arts woodshop for the last 3 years, somebody would ask me, they go, oh, do you have this tool? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know what it's for. And they're like, oh, well, this is what it's for. And I was like, oh, okay, that's so cool. Like, I didn't know that. And so it was definitely a learning experience for me, even being in a shop that I was very familiar with.
That is so funny. So the faculty failed you. They didn't show you what all the tools were.
No. They didn't fail me. It was just, maybe it was something that was possibly shown to me, or, I hadn't had any interest in it at the time, or hadn't seen it used in that sort of way.
All right. We won't give them too hard a time.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about your work in this show?
My work in this show is really a continuation of my thesis work that I was doing, where it's functional, but it's sculptural. It has to do with a crossover between woodworking and jewelry making, and adornment of the body, adornment of furniture, where that language crosses over conceptually and visually. I really kind of pushed myself with the rings that I had made, because I always have this need to incorporate metal and wood together. In my mind, they belong together. And the rings that I made were completely just out of wood. So that was a big stretch for me. Okay, I'm going to use one material, and it's going to be wood, and it's going to be a functional piece of jewelry. And it ended up working out really well. And I think that's because I was exposed to all of these woodworkers that know how to use metal. But if you don't have access to a metal studio, what do you do to make the work that you want to make? So limitations were key.
Rebecca, looking at your tattoos and ear piercings and whatnot, and then looking at Betty, you're very different looking people, but you seem like the two of you are very close friends.
Yeah, we're actually quite similar in that we both like to carve. Very intricate things. I don't know. Yeah, I feel like outward appearance doesn't have as much to do with relationships as it used to, It just doesn't seem like that much of a thing anymore.
I'm a guy, and I am a little bit jealous of how well the seven of you got along.
Yeah, everybody bonded, got along. I feel like we are just now forging some lifelong friendships and relationships, so that's a really awesome thing to be able to say about a very short residency.
I'm Betty Scarpino. This is actually my second residency. I did the first one in 1999. I was invited to apply this year as the photojournalist because I edited American Woodturner Journal for 6 years. So I am familiar with photojournalism and brought that skill with me along with being an artist. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. Lived there for probably 30 years. I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, so that influences my work a little bit. I just walked into a wood shop when I was 25 at the University of Missouri, and I ended up getting a degree in industrial arts. I learned a lot about woodworking. Toward the end, I decided to go ahead and try the lathe. That was the last machine that I gave a go at. And I really enjoyed it, learned a lot about it. I also took some sculpture classes in the art department. So I've been working with wood in some capacity since 1975. I do a lot of turning and carving and a lot of sculpture, just direct carving. My work is somewhat figurative, abstract figurative. Unlike many of the other residents here who draw their art projects out and then make them, I don't. I just start with a piece of wood and an idea and then work intuitively with that. Usually the photojournalist does something for the exhibit itself, and so I decided that what I would do is my impression of each one of the artists as we worked throughout the 8 weeks.
Were you trying to imitate their styles a little bit, or?
No, it wasn't so much an imitation of the style. It was a combination of their personality and maybe what they were working on also. My impression of the two combined, so it really had a lot to do with the personality too, and maybe even where they were from. In Michaela's case, she's from Maine, so when I made the woodcut print, I used this real cold blue to represent Maine. And for Katie, I made something called a turning fetish. Katie has somewhat resisted wood turning. And I am known as a wood turner, so we joked early on about her getting on the lathe, and I would say, Katie, it would be just as easy to turn that part as it would be to carve it or whatever you're doing. So I got to thinking about what I wanted to do for a box, and Katie helped me work through some of the issues with making a hinge for a box, so she helped me through that. And inside of it is a little wood turning fetish, is kind of a tribute to her.
Betty's impressions piece of me is scary and pointy with a heart of gold.
Were they all pretty nice? You can tell the truth.
No. This was an amazing group of women. I wrote a tribute to them, and you maybe, if you're going to come in here, you can read what I wrote. It's a fabulous group of women. They're all mature. They can work in a way that is dedicated and focused. I learned a lot from them too, not just with the techniques and what they're doing, but also just how to get along in a residency and how to be supportive of each other, and we really were.
We taught her how to not cry during the glue up and just, get on with it. So now I just throw up before but the crying has ceased. So that's good. That's one thing we figured out together as a group.
Never panic. Never panic. Never panic.